So thank you. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And now I'd like to pass the mic to Mike Herald. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Catherine. And thanks to everyone who joined the Meet the Advocates program today. I would note, though, I'm seeing a few people out here who've actually met the Advocate before. You know who you are. I see you out there. Anyway, just having a little fun with you all. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have a little PowerPoint, and it has two pieces to it. One is sort of Budget 101. It just kind of will quickly run through kind of like what is the budget? What does it do? How does it work? And then we're going to talk about the current budget and the status of it and where things will be going in the future. And then hopefully we'll have about at least 15 minutes or so at the end to do some Q&A. And I would encourage you to use the chat as much as you can. If I will do my best not to speak too quickly or to use too many acronyms, but sometimes I slip up. So if you hear me use an acronym, and you can ask in the chat, and we'll try to get it answered as quickly as we can. Or Catherine will interrupt me and tell me, "Hey, Mike, answer that question in the chat." So let me try to share my screen here. This is always an adventure, but hopefully it'll work. Wow, I did it. Okay, now I just need to go to the top. There we go. Okay, there it is. An insider's view of the state budget. This is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite things I like to say. It's all about money, not a damn thing funny. And that's actually a quote from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five's song, "The Message," song I really like a lot. And this is one of the things from it that I really believe that if you really want to make policy change, you've got to be involved with the budget side and know how to get the funding that we need in order to change the trajectory of our clients' lives. Bills are great. We do lots of them every year. We've had hundreds of them signed over time, and they continue to be an important part of our work. But in general, when we want to make really broad, large change that impacts hundreds, if not millions of people, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, that work is going to take place in the state budget. So, you know, some people are a little afraid of the budget. They think budgets are bad, or that, you know, money is bad, it's the root of all evil. And, you know, I guess that's true, unless some good people get in there and are involved in the budget process and push back on it. And so we've really built a practice over, I actually learned budget from my predecessor, Casey McKeever, back in the mid-1990s. And Western Center was involved doing budget work well before that, because this is the place where the really big decisions get made that impact our clients. Budgets control virtually every aspect of our lives, from schools to the environment, to public safety, the courts, public benefits, healthcare, taxation. It just goes on and on. All of these things don't fund affordable housing programs, don't happen unless they're funded in the state budget. And like I said before, this is the place where you can really make dramatic change, where you can affect hundreds of thousands of people with one policy change within the state budget. So here's a little background. This is kind of Budget 101, but the budget starts sort of officially every January 10th. By the Constitution, the governor must release his January proposal for how to spend the budget for the upcoming year. So in January of 2022, the governor released his budget, and that is a budget that will go into effect July 1 of 2022, and then be in effect. Our fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30th every year. Once the governor releases his budget, the legislature then begins to have hearings, and they will go through every single issue in the governor's budget. There are 6 different policy subcommittees in each house. And in fact, these hearings are going to start in about 2 weeks because of some logistical issues in Sacramento. Things are being moved up very quickly. But yes, budget hearings start and they spend 4 or 5 months reviewing the governor's proposals and coming to an agreement with them. In May, the governor issues what's called the May revision. And many people look at this as sort of like when things get really revved up and we're really going to focus very intently now on the budget. And partly that is because by May, we have a much better sense of what the revenue projections will be for the following year. So governor's budget has often got significant change from the January budget. And it's this document that really becomes the template for the discussions that ensue. The legislature has a constitutional duty to pass the budget by June 15th. And in recent years, we've been doing that. I'll talk in a second just about why that is. And then the governor has to sign the main budget bill by July 1st. Now, budgets are not just one bill. They're actually 30 or 40 bills. We call them trailer bills. And sometimes the trailer bills don't get signed till after July 1st. But in the main, most of them get done prior to July 1st, and the governor signs all of them by the deadline, so we have a budget that's on time. But this process, I think, really kind of is, it's sort of the public's view of how the budget, but really it's just the tip of the iceberg. The moment that budget gets signed by the governor on July 1 or thereabouts, the administrative agencies already begin the process of writing the next budget. We never stop working on the budget. It's an ongoing year-round process. Once the session ends, the state agencies and departments begin to forward up the chain of command their proposals for what they would like to see in the next budget. Those proposals go to the next level up, the agencies, as we call them, and they cull through them all, and then they forward those proposals up to the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance is the most important agency in all of state government because all agencies have to be accountable to the Department of Finance for their funding. So the Department of Finance is really the last major gatekeeper before these proposals get to the governor's office. Agencies can and do lobby intensely with their agency and with the governor and the Department of Finance to get their proposals included. And that fighting can be pretty intense at times. Sometimes we don't even know what's going on until later on. But there's a lot of work that happens between July 1 of each fiscal year and January 10th when a budget makes its first public unveiling. And this whole process is kept very secretive by the administration. Budgets are really always a legacy of the past. All budgets are really just built off the previous budgets. So the Department of Finance, DOF, as my acronym here on the screen is, they begin by including everything that is constitutionally, statutorily, or judicially mandated. So that is what we call the baseline budget. This is the budget that's required by law, essentially, for the state to run. Now, if the Department of Finance thinks that there's something in the law that isn't appropriate anymore, or they don't agree with it on a policy basis, they can propose to pull that out of the budget. But they can't do that without the permission of the legislature. So that's what I mean. All the statutory, judicially mandated, and constitutionally required provisions have to be included within the budget. So what a budget really is, at the end of the day, it's really a whole series of small additions, small subtractions, and little tweaks to the baseline budget. So we're not, we don't recreate the budget anew every year. We basically just build off the old one and then add a few bells and whistles to it. having said that, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these bells and whistles that get addressed in every budget, though. So there's a lot that's going on, but 90% of the funding that the state has for its programs doesn't really change year to year. So that's why I say the architecture of the budgets really always stay the same. That's why major program change can be challenging. Now, advocates can influence this process. And I think we at Western Center have become increasingly good at playing the off-season game. So, you know, when the lights are on and the cameras are rolling and we're doing budget hearings and, you know, the legislators are quizzing the Department of Finance and the governor's people and the state agencies, you know, that's kind of showtime, right? That's the public piece of our work that we all get to see. And we certainly play in that arena. That's part of the process. But what I would say is that it's that pre-work between July and January 10th that really is impactful. And so we often will be meeting with the state agencies and departments that are proposing things and try to get our ideas into the mix, or to hear what they're thinking about, if they'll tell us, and suggest, hey, that's a good idea, or have you considered this? We really try to lobby the governor's office hard. I mean, we meet with the Department of Finance, the line staff and the senior staff. We meet with the governor's people directly. And again, we try to get our issues into the mix. Now, sometimes that isn't successful. I mean, I spent a good amount of my fall trying to get an SSI grant increase included in the January budget for this year, and the governor didn't do it. But all that work still is preparation and gets our issue in front of all the governor's folks and Department of Finance's folks. They know we're coming. They know this is an issue they're going to have to deal with the legislature this year. So even if you don't get your item in the budget in January, you still made progress. And if you get your item in the budget, like we did a few years ago, where we got the repeal of license suspensions for people who had failed to pay their traffic tickets, the governor put that in the budget under Governor Brown. This happened. And you get something in the governor's budget and you're golden. You're going to win. So that's how impactful it can be if you can succeed in this process. Anyway, as the proposals work through the system, by late November, the Department of Finance will be getting an updated revenue estimate. And it's from that document that they get that they begin to start to really cull down and make decisions about what can be in and out of the budget. So when the revenue is rising, like it has been the last couple of years, you're going to see a lot more proposals get included. And when it's not such a good year, you're going to see them do very little. But even in that case, most of these proposals that come, we call them BCPs, budget change proposals. Most of these changes that are being promoted by the departments don't end up getting included. There's only a handful of things that really do get included. And of course, there's always a political shine that goes on any of these decisions, right? The governor's always looking about the communication side of what is in a budget, about how he can be communicating to the public at large about what his intents are, why he's a good guy or a good person to have as a governor, because he's meeting the needs of people. So many of these decisions are really also, being crafted around the political messaging that they want to use. It's generally the case that governors are conservative in their January budget. Our current governor, not so much. He tends to be more aggressive and has his own ideas about things that he wants to do, and is more willing to put forth proposals than we've seen from most prior governors. So, the legislature has a really big role here. They ultimately have to approve the budget. And it used to be the budgets had a 2/3 vote requirement. What that did in practice, though, is that it really gave power to the minority party, because there was never one house that had, or one party that had 2/3 of the members in their house. Now we do have that now, but back in the day, we never did. So what it did is it really shifted the power to the minority party. They really were calling the shots in the budget. Unless they got what they wanted, and because they had to put up a handful of votes in order to get to 2/3, they could just make endless demands on the process. And that's why the budget used to be late all the time. It's because the minority party had all the power, and this was their one chance to really wield influence, and they weren't going to let go of that anytime fast. So when the voters approved Prop 56, it really had a transformational effect on the budget and on politics at the state level. All the games that used to get played around the budget, they've all pretty much faded away. It's really now a much more serious kind of like close to the, I mean, I shouldn't say it this way. It's really a much more a traditional process that really is not being influenced so much by the political winds of the minority party anymore. So the legislature can reduce spending, they can add spending, they can say no to proposals, and there's always a whole negotiation that goes on, especially the last couple of weeks before the budget's done, where the legislature and the governor are going to horse trade about things that will be in the budget and not in the budget. But let's be clear, governors almost always get what they want. They're going to get 90% of what they propose is going to end up being adopted in the budget. And the legislature is going to get a handful of things in exchange for putting up the votes that they need to pass the budget on time. So in recent years, and this is by no means a comprehensive list of the things that we have gotten done in the budget. But I mean, just a few of these: eliminating the CalWORKs family cap, which was a policy that said that if you are on CalWORKs assistance and you have another child, we're not going to provide any more cash assistance for that family, even though you've got another mouth to feed. This was a policy that was really directed at African-American Latino families who, under Pete Wilson, this is a policy that was instituted under Governor Wilson, and really had a horrible, ruinous effect on a lot of families whose children end up living in really abject, deep poverty due to this policy change. We got it fixed with the help of then Senator Holly Mitchell. We also ended the lifetime ban on public benefits for persons with drug felonies in both the CalFresh and the CalWORKs programs. This had been another policy that had been on the books for 20 years. I think we ran the bill, like literally, we ran this bill 17 times before we finally got it done in the budget. 4 years ago now, we got CalFresh benefits for SSI recipients. We were the only state in the country that did not allow SSI recipients to get CalFresh. So this was really a big thing. A lot of recipients now are getting $70 to $100 a month more. It's worth in the range of about $500 million annually to the state, the increase in food SNAP benefits that we're bringing into the California economy every year. And that's every year that is flowing again. So it's an annual $500 million that we are bringing. We have done a remarkable job in the last half dozen years of repealing noxious criminal fines and fees, traffic fines and fees, parking fines and fees, school lunch fees and fines, the shame sandwich as we call it. We have eliminated the practice of failure of license suspensions for failures to pay. We won that both in the budget, and then we won it subsequently through some litigation that we brought successfully against the state of California. This is amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars in reduced fines and fees for our clients, and we are not stopped. We have more on the agenda to go for this year. We've increased CalWORKs grants in recent years. We've had essentially about a $300 a month increase in the cash grant that we provide CalWORKs recipients, and we finally have reached 50% of the federal poverty level. We're not, meaning some children are still living in deep poverty in the CalWORKs program, and we have proposals this year to change that, but we have made major progress in this arena. It used to be embarrassing how abject our CalWORKs families were living at. Last year, we secured $1.3 billion in pandemic relief for SSI and CalWORKs recipients. These are the so-called $600 checks that went out. We got 2 of those for CalWORKs families, and we got 1 for every 1.1 million people on SSI. We partnered with our Legal Aid Association of California and other players, and we secured $90 million last year in legal aid funding through the Equal Access Fund, including a huge $40 million appropriation to help with evictions. And then a few years ago, we passed, in coalition with other groups, we passed a $1.3 billion tax increase that went to fund the child tax credit, which is providing assistance through a form of the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit at the state level. So again, these are ongoing appropriations. So this is just a taste of the work that we've done. I know I think I have probably not put up much here on the health side, which is because I don't do health, my colleagues do, and I'm not as well versed on that. But we certainly have done a lot in recent years also on the health side that we could, if I had all the time in the world, I could talk you through all of that too. So here's this year's budget. We are having a unprecedented revenue windfall right now. Last year's budget, I believe at the end of the day, we were in the range of $60 to $70 billion surplus over the projected budget from the year before. This year's budget is $45 billion. It's a $45 billion surplus over what we project. So, every year we project the following year what we think our budget numbers are going to be. And so this says that we're, over the course of this budget year, we're going to be $45 billion higher than we anticipated. So that means we have more money to spend, and some of it we can spend on good things. But as we've been doing in the recent years, we're stocking away money for rainy days. Under this budget, and this number is probably going to go up, I bet, by the time we get to June, we'll have $36 billion in reserves. And this is really important because in the past, when we've had really bad budget years and we had to make reductions, we had no safety net in the budget to stop those cuts. And now we do. We have money there to prevent really wholesale cuts to Medi-Cal, to CalWORKs, to SSI, and to many, many other parts of state government. So this really gives us kind of a safety net that we've never really enjoyed before. Out of this budget surplus of $45 billion, just because of all the money that's being socked away in reserves and because we have mandatory expenditures like Prop 98 that we have to fulfill, there's only about $20 billion left in this out of this $45 billion that can actually be spent on needs for the state. And according to the legislature, legislative analysts, only about $3 billion of this can be spent on ongoing programs. So a lot of the spending that you saw last year and a lot of the increased spending that you'll see this year is for what we call one-time funds, one-time expenditures. Something that you can, like building affordable housing units is a great example of one-time funding. They can go in, we build 10,000 units of housing, and then next year, if we can't afford to do that again, it's no big deal because this was enough money to build those 10,000 units of housing. So that's the way we think about one-time funding. It makes for some creative work on our end. We have to think about projects that we can potentially put forth to take advantage of the fact that there's one-time money, because our general inclination is to always go for ongoing permanent spending. And most of the proposals that you'll see, I'm going to describe in a minute, are really of that vein. Now, we have some limits, and we have a constitutional limit called the GAN limit, which is a cap on how much the state expenditures can increase year to year. And because we've been having these really robust revenue increases, we are bumping up or actually exceeding the GAN limit. And under that formula, if we do that, we either have to give the money to schools who already get a huge chunk of the money, or we can return it to taxpayers, or we can spend it on emergency appropriations like a pandemic, for example, where to keep ourselves below the limit. But we're getting to a point now where there's only going to be so many ways we can spend the money. We are increasingly getting high above the limit. And this is becoming a real obstacle to being able to do ongoing funding that we really prefer to do at Western Center. So as I said, there's a huge increase in education funding. It's about $9 billion in the governor's budget. Their funding annual now is $102 billion on an annualized basis. I mean, it has more than doubled in the last half a dozen years, I would say. This budget includes a proposal that we have been championing along with many other health groups to do, provide Medi-Cal for all who are eligible. Basically, this meant there was an exclusion on undocumented persons from being able to get Medi-Cal. The governor's proposing that we'll cover everybody now. We think this is a great proposal. And it's a big victory for us and all the health groups that have been championing this, the immigrant rights groups, for many years. There's a 7.1% increase in CalWORKs grants, which is a good thing, but I'm not satisfied. We want more, and we will be asking for a substantial increase over this amount in the budget this year. There's a 1.5 billion here in new workforce development that will focus on training healthcare workers. We have a real shortage of healthcare workers in the field right now, partly obviously driven by the current pandemic, but the numbers are not good. We're going to need to have more people in this field, and this might be an opportunity for a lot of low-income folks to get in on these training programs and be able to get really good paying jobs out of them. Something we've been working on for several years now, and this kind of goes with our fines and fees work, is child support. You'll be surprised to know that the state of California takes the child support payments away from CalWORKs families, makes them give them to the state, and then the state gives them a slight part of the money, $50 to $100 a month if they get a payment at all. But the state keeps the rest of the money and reimburses themselves for the cost of their CalWORKs. So, we want non-custodial parents to pay child support, but then we send this completely mixed message of never giving the money to the kid. So we're trying to end that. The governor is actually halfway there with this now. It's taken us years to get them there, but the governor actually proposed in the budget to pass through, as we say, all child support payments for former CalWORKs cases, but is still not proposing to do it for current CalWORKs cases. So we're going to be trying to finish the work here. This is a good proposal, but we just think it needs to go one step further. The governor's also proposing to expand the state child tax credit to households with no reported income. So, the state has really set up some very robust tax credit programs in recent years. And this would actually mean that somebody who had a child who's on SSI, for example, or has no income or Social Security, but you're caring for a child, maybe it's your own, maybe it's a family member's. Right now, unless you had earnings of $1 or more, you didn't get a tax credit under this program. So this would say, look, if you've got a kid in your household and you're income eligible, we're going to give you a tax credit, which is a good thing. People need money. Providing cash to people is the way we end poverty. And then lastly, the governor's proposing to reduce civil assessments, which is you get a $300 fine right now if you don't pay your ticket on time or you don't show up to court. And these they really run up the bills on low-income folks, and we've been trying to eliminate them. So the governor's proposing to cut half of it. Again, we're going to go for the other half. Here's a few things, though, that I think we would note about the budget. We're a little disappointed that this budget doesn't really have any proposals for further child poverty reduction. We have made great strides in recent years. We've really reduced the poverty level down. I think we're now down to around 9% under the federal poverty level. It's a little higher under the supplemental level, but it's because we're providing so much cash assistance to people and because of the federal child tax credits. And so this budget is disappointing, I think, in a way, because we're not proposing to make any more progress on this. And we're right at the edge. If we just make some more investments, take it up a level, we're going to really start to have an impact on child poverty. There's no proposal here to do another round of the $600 checks, the Golden State grants, the Golden State stimulus. The governor kind of hinted that he might be willing to do it at the May revise, but there's no proposal in here now. And again, cash is king. People with cash are going to do better. They're going to have less poverty. I just discussed the child pass-through thing. Also, we continue to have concerns about some of the proposals around homelessness. The governor has a proposal, for example, to spend $500 million on homeless encampment cleanups, which gives us a lot of pause for concern. And it does seem as an overall matter that we're throwing a lot of money at homeless programs right now, but we really don't have a comprehensive view about it. And we also, as I say, if you want to end homelessness, It's like, if you get a leak at your house in your water, so you start getting a flood in your house, the first thing you do is you go outside and you turn the water off, because you're never going to bail your way out of that. Well, we never turn the homeless water off. We allow people to continually flow out in the street, and we never go to the source and stop them from coming out in the first place. And our unwillingness to do that means we end up spending so much more money on the back end. So there's like a couple of $1 billion in this budget on homeless stuff. Sounds great. Is it going to really solve the problem? We've got our doubts. There's no plan to backfill the lost federal child tax credit. This is something we're raising with the administration and are talking about with the legislature also. And, we need to do something to help the childcare world. So many centers have closed, so many people have left the employment side, and it's really impinging on the ability of people to be able to get to work. So these are all things that we're looking to get done. This is a very quick summary. We have many, many more things. You can go on our website and see our summary of the budget and some of the issues that we raised there too. So I'm going to stop talking, which I'm sure is going to be a great relief to all of you. So.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was wonderful. We do have our first question in the chat asking about child support payments and how that might interact with the foster care system.
You might be helpful to be a little bit more precise, but one thing I can tell you is that I believe this is right. The state also does not pass on child support payments for kids who are in foster care. Again, we take the money and we reimburse ourselves, the state, for the cost of providing foster care to kids. This is, again, it's one of those issues in the mix that we would like to get taken care of. And I think you're going to be seeing us in the future, starting this year, more engaged and active on foster care and child welfare related issues.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions, folks? Please feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you'd prefer, now's a great time to come off mute and ask your question aloud if you'd like.
I'll ask a question because I'm not typing fast enough. Hi, Mike.
I know this voice.
This is Erin. You talked about we're not turning off the main line of the water regarding homelessness. What do you see as what would be the right response to homelessness? Are you talking about addiction, mental health, or is there something else?
Money. The main reason that most people are homeless is because they can't afford the cost of the rent. And so, we like to build buildings for people and throw money at programs and things, but the main reason that people become homeless is because they don't have enough money. So one thing that we've been proposing, for example, and we have a meeting coming up with some of our allies, is to propose a major rental assistance program for low-income Californians. So again, this is the idea of turning off the water. What we would want to do is we know from our public benefit systems how much people are paying in rent, and we know how much income they have every month. So we can calculate and figure out who has a high rent burden. If we see people who are paying more than 50% of their income towards rent, we know they're housing unstable, and that there's a likelihood that in the future they could, one bad month, they don't get enough income in, or they have a big bill that wipes out their savings and takes away money from them, they are potentially going to fall behind in the rent and then get evicted. So we can fix this. We know who these folks are right now, and we should be giving them additional cash assistance to allow them to be able to pay the rent. So we can use our current system. We don't have to build a whole new infrastructure. We need to get out ahead of these problems. Now, there are obviously a lot of people on the streets, and we're going to have a solution for them too. But in terms of turning off the water, we need a rental assistance program.
All right, another question from the chat. In addition to increasing pay for providers of childcare, as for healthcare workers, should there be money in the budget to train childcare personnel?
Yeah, I think there probably should be. And we need to encourage folks to go into that field. But unless these other problems get solved, I think it's going to be hard to recruit folks into those training programs because they just don't see a future in those jobs.
Are there opponents of policies that help low-income people aside from the opposition party? In other words, are you up against various lobbyists? Who are you kind of boxing it out with, Mike?
It really depends upon the issue area. So in public benefits, there really aren't any quote unquote opponents of the work that we do. We have to convince the Department of Finance and the governor's office to spend money. I don't refer to them as opponents. They're not our opponents. We work collegially with them. But yeah, that's who that is. On the healthcare side, again, most of the even the big insurers and the providers all support the efforts to fully expand Medi-Cal to implement the Affordable Care Act. Now, there can be differences of opinion about the level of services and who should provide those. And so, sometimes we get into issues with the providers and the big plans about what their role and responsibility should be in there. But in the big stuff, on the big issues, that most of the groups are pretty well aligned. I think where we have the biggest issues is when we get into consumer issues, consumer debt issues. Then we start to see opposition from industry, like the banks, the lenders, and folks who try to collect debt from our clients. So, they'll get out there with active, engaged lobbying efforts to try to stop us.
Yes, I like to say something as well. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Hi, Janae.
Hi.
Janae's a ringer, don't
Say that again.
She's a ringer. I would just note. I mean, she's a friend of our ED, and she's somebody I know well.
Yes. And you mentored very well when I was in WPI.
Thank
So
you.
I just want to go back to the homeless issues. As you know, I work with the largest homeless agency in the state of California, and I exclusively work with families experiencing homelessness. Since the last 2 years, since you and I were working together, when I was going on the premise of increasing the skills of individuals so that they would be able to have sustainable income and have a career pathway. That has proven to be true because especially when you're talking about families, heads of households, no, they're not on drugs, no, they're not insane. If it was that bad, their children would be taken away. So I've been working with Fortune 500 companies and UCLA and a number of community colleges just to be able to help individuals get into a career pathway, starting to make, whether it's $20 an hour, $25, even starting $35 an hour. So therefore, the sustainable, the subsidized housing, it's nice to have that in the short run, but on the long run, they will be able to move forward and to be able to pay the fair market value. We're not looking at that type of a model. And we're always focusing on the housing piece. And I often say in closing, housing minus employment is a disaster. And especially now we have that skills gap. And a lot of people are moving into low income and they can't afford the housing, but we're not focusing on increasing their skills gap or at least getting them into a career pathway. So thank you.
No, I think your comments are well taken, and I think sometimes also when in the CalWorks program, for example, I think we have this tendency to want to push people into employment and to training programs when they're not quite ready yet either. So there is this kind of balance, I think, where I think there's some evidence, some research that shows that if we can help stabilize families economically, then they'll be able to take advantage of the training opportunities and be able to do them effectively and get through those processes well. And then they'll get off public assistance and won't need housing subsidies and other help. But we have a very judgmental attitude a lot of times about the poor. And we often enact policies that I think Janae's well pointing out here that aren't really terribly constructive.
Next question from the chat is, why is there such a big budget surplus this year?
Well, contrary to popular opinion, rich people are not leaving California. We have a lot of really, really, really rich people here. And we have a very progressive income tax for the wealthy, for the top 0.1% of our taxpayers. This was something that we instituted during the difficult budget years. Governor Brown took that to the ballot, the voters approved it. Despite some of the challenges that a lot of our population has had, the public's had in the last 2 years, people at the top end of the income bracket are doing just fine. In fact, they've been making a ton of money on Wall Street in their investments. And if they own the right companies, like Zoom, for example, their stocks shot up in value. And so you're seeing a lot of capital gains taxes being paid. And overall, incomes are high in California and people pay a lot of taxes off that. So there's really no mystery to where the money's coming from. We have a lot of rich people.
Another question in the chat asking how specifically we're approaching advocacy towards AB 1400, which is universal healthcare.
So, there are multiple paths to universal healthcare. And I think there is this, I think AB 1400 is the bill. Again, health is not my specialty, but I believe AB 1400 is the bill that would have a single payer system. So this would take all the money that's being spent on healthcare through a variety of forms, whether it's Medi-Cal, Medicaid, private insurance, the Covered California Marketplace, put all those resources together, and then all medical systems would be paid out of a single pot controlled by, assumedly, the state government. So conceptually, that sounds really good, and I know we've been supportive of that as an idea. I think when you get down into the details of how you make all of that happen, I think there are some substantial legal obstacles. And we are a bunch of lawyers here at Western Center, and so we tend to understand that this is not going to be as easy as it sounds, and it's really a major. It would be major federal policy change that would have to be enacted for us to do this. So we don't necessarily see AB 1400 as something that will be implemented right away. That's why we continue to pursue other policies like Medi-Cal for All and ensuring that the affordable care market really works well for average people.
Awesome. So question about if the PowerPoint will be shared with participants. We will be sharing a recording of this, and yes, we will look to see if there's a way to share the slides as well. We probably have time for about one, maybe two more questions. If anyone else would like to pop anything into the chat or come off mute and share a question aloud.
I answered them all, apparently.
So thorough.
Oh, there's another ringer.
Wonderful. Well, we'll just pause a little bit longer in case anyone's furiously trying to type in the chat. I don't want to cut anyone off, but do want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like I said, we will be circulating a link to the recording of this soon, so you'll have that to rewatch if you'd like, or to share with others who weren't able to join us today. I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so we'll go ahead and end. Thank you again, everyone, and we hope to see you again. We're planning to do these quarterly this year, so TBD on a date, but save a space on your calendar for May when we'll be back with the next Meet the Advocate event. Thanks again, everyone, for joining.
Thank you for joining today, everyone.